If she ignores you, most men make the same fatal mistake. They chase. They send double texts. They ask what went wrong. They overthink every single word they said. And with each message, each anxious thought, each desperate move, they lose more value. They hand over their power on a silver platter. They become predictable, needy, easy to dismiss. The game is over before they even realize they were playing. But here's what nobody tells you. Her silence is not a command to pursue. It's information. It's data. It's a psychological tool being used to measure your reaction, to test your emotional strength, to see if you'll collapse under pressure. And most men fail this test every single time. I'm going to show you why her silence is information, not instruction, and how to turn that silence into your advantage. This isn't about manipulation to hurt someone. This is about self-protection, maintaining your value, and making conscious choices instead of emotional reactions. If you've ever felt that knot in your stomach when she stops responding, if you've ever stared at your phone waiting for a reply that never comes, if you've ever questioned your entire personality because of 3 days of silence, then you need to understand what's really happening. And before we go further, hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel is dedicated to giving you the raw truth about human dynamics, the strategies that actually work, and the mindset shifts that change everything. Don't just watch, take action. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and commit to leveling up. Let me take you back to a principle that Machiavelli understood 500 years ago. Control of the narrative is control of power. When someone controls your emotional state, when they can trigger anxiety or relief with a single text or lack thereof, they control you. Silence, ghosting, hot and cold behavior, these aren't random. They serve a function. They measure your reaction. They measure your need. They measure whether you're a man with options or a man with desperation. In the theater of human interaction, silence is one of the oldest and most effective tests of character. It reveals who you really are when you're not being watched, when you're not getting validation, when you're alone with your thoughts and your ego. And here's the brutal truth. Most men fail because they've been conditioned to believe that persistence equals interest, that chasing equals caring, that explaining yourself equals maturity. But in the game of attraction and respect, those beliefs are poison. They destroy your value faster than anything else you could possibly do. The cultural programming runs deep, and it starts early. You watched movies where the hero chases the girl across the airport, where he stands outside her window with a boombox, where he proves his love through grand gestures and relentless pursuit. You internalize the message that real men don't give up, that if you want her badly enough, you'll fight for her no matter what. But those are fairy tales written to sell tickets and create emotional highs. They're not blueprints for actual human psychology. In reality, the man who chases is the man who loses respect. The man who can't take a hint is the man who gets labeled as desperate, creepy, or worse. The cultural narrative sold you a lie, and that lie is costing you relationships, opportunities, and dignity. So why is silence used? Let me break this down for you in a way that cuts through all the dating advice noise. Silence is a strategic test. When she pulls back her attention, when she stops responding with the same energy, when she goes from paragraph text to one-word answers or no answers at all, she's testing whether you collapse emotionally. She's testing whether you become needy, whether you chase, whether you change your behavior to accommodate her withdrawal. This isn't always conscious. Sometimes it's instinctive, but the effect is the same. The man who panics, who floods her inbox, who seeks explanations, who tries to fix something that isn't broken, that man loses. He loses respect, he loses attraction, he loses the frame, because in that moment he's revealed that his emotional state depends on her. And nothing kills attraction faster than emotional dependence. When you show that your happiness, your confidence, your sense of self-worth all hinge on her response time, you've essentially told her that she's more valuable than you are. You've placed her on a pedestal and yourself in the dirt. You've established a hierarchy where she's the prize and you're the contestant desperately trying to win. And once that dynamic is set, it's almost impossible to reverse. She now knows that she can control your mood, your behavior, your entire emotional landscape with nothing more than her attention or lack thereof. That's enormous power to give someone, and most men hand it over without even realizing what they've done. Silence is also a tool of psychological control. It produces anxiety. It creates overthinking. It triggers your validation-seeking mechanisms. When you don't know where you stand, your brain goes into overdrive trying to figure it out. You replay conversations, you analyze every detail, you create stories about what you did wrong. And all of that mental energy, all of that emotional labor, it's fuel for control. The person who can remain calm while you spiral, the person who can withhold attention while you beg for it, that person has the power. And most men hand over that power without a fight. They don't even realize they're doing it. They think they're being caring, communicative, interested. But what they're actually doing is supplicating. They're saying, you have the power to determine my emotional state. You decide if I feel good or bad today. You decide if I'm worthy or not. And once you've said that, implicitly or explicitly, the dynamic is set. You're no longer an equal. You're a petitioner begging for a favor from someone on a throne you built for them. You've surrendered the game before it even really started? Now let's get tactical. Because understanding the theory is useless if you don't know how to apply it in real situations. There are three main types of silence you'll encounter, and each one requires a different interpretation and response. The first type is what I call the test. This is when she pulls back, but she's still watching. She might like your stories, she might view your posts, she might respond occasionally but with lower energy. She's not gone, she's distant. And the objective here is crystal clear. She wants to see if you chase or if you maintain your composure. She wants to know if your confidence was real or just a performance. This is the most common type of silence in the early stages of dating or in established relationships when she's feeling uncertain about your value. The signs are obvious once you know what to look for. She's active on social media, she's responding to others, but with you, there's a delay. There's coolness, there's distance. She hasn't cut you off, she's just stepped back to watch what you do next. And what most men do is exactly what she's hoping they won't do. They chase, they overcompensate. They try to recreate the initial spark through effort alone. And in doing so, they confirm her suspicions. This man needs my validation more than I need his. This man is desperate for my attention. The second type is the processing. This is when she genuinely pulls back for reasons that have nothing to do with you. Maybe she's dealing with family issues, work stress, mental health struggles, personal crisis. The signs here are different. She's not just distant with you, she's distant from everyone. She's not active on social media. She's not out partying and posting stories while ignoring you. She's actually withdrawn from her entire social circle. This type of silence requires a different approach. It requires respect, not panic. It requires space, not pursuit. The mistake men make here is assuming that her withdrawal is about them, that they need to fix it, that they need to prove their value. But in reality, the strongest move is to give her space while continuing to live your life. No dramatic messages, no demands for explanation, no guilt trips. Just a calm acknowledgement that you're there if she needs you, and then you move on with your purpose. This type of silence is actually a gift. It shows you whether she has the emotional intelligence to communicate her needs, and it shows you whether you have the emotional strength to not make her problems about your ego. Can you be secure enough to let her deal with her own issues without inserting yourself into the narrative? The third type is the rejection. This is the hardest one for men to accept because it requires admitting that she's simply not interested. The signs are brutal if you're willing to see them. Responses are consistently short, excuses are repeated, there's coldness that never warms up, plans are canceled or vague, and there's a pattern of disinterest that's undeniable if you're honest with yourself. The objective here is to end the connection without confrontation. She's using silence and low effort as a way to fade out, hoping you'll get the message without her having to say it directly. And here's where men torture themselves. They hold on to hope, they analyze every tiny interaction for signs of life. They convince themselves that persistence will pay off. But the reality is simple. When a woman is interested, she makes it easy. When she's not, she makes it difficult. and trying to turn difficulty into ease through effort is a fool's errand. The strong move here is to accept the information, withdraw your attention entirely, and redirect your energy toward women who actually want to be in your presence. No bitterness, no anger, no need to prove anything. Just a clean exit and a clear boundary. You thank her for her time, you wish her well, and you move forward with your life. This is what dignified men do. They don't argue with disinterest. They don't try to convince someone to want them. They recognize when the door is closed and they walk away with their head high, knowing that somewhere else there's a door wide open. So how do you respond? What's the master move that neutralizes these games without making you cold, bitter, or manipulative? Here's the principle. You maintain composure, you equalize timing, and you conserve your value. This is not about playing games. This is about strategic communication and self-respect. If she takes 4 hours to respond, you take 4 hours or more. If she's short in her messages, you match that energy. If she's distant, you create distance. But here's the crucial difference. You're not doing this out of spite or revenge. You're doing it because you're busy building a life that doesn't revolve around her response time. You're doing it because you have options, priorities, and a mission that matters more than any single interaction. The reflection strategy works because it removes the power dynamic. When you chase, you're saying her attention is more valuable than yours. When you match her energy, you're saying we're equals and I won't subsidize disinterest with effort. You're establishing a standard that says, I invest in people who invest in me. I give energy to people who give energy back. And if that's not happening, I redirect my focus elsewhere. But here's where most advice stops, and here's where it gets real. Matching energy is not enough. You have to transform your reaction into action. Silence from her is not a pause button on your life. It's a green light to focus on everything else. This is when you hit the gym harder. This is when you work on that project you've been delaying. This is when you call up friends you haven't seen in weeks. This is when you learn that skill, read that book, build that business. You don't sit in your room staring at your phone hoping she texts. You build yourself into someone who doesn't need her to text. And here's the psychological magic. When you genuinely shift your focus, when you actually start progressing in visible ways, the dynamic changes. Maybe you post about the gym, about a win at work, about time with friends. Not to make her jealous, that's childish and obvious. But because you're genuinely living your life and documenting it naturally, what happens? She sees it. And if there was any part of her that was testing you, any part that was waiting to see if you'd break, she now sees that you didn't. She sees that you're not sitting around waiting for her. She sees that you have a life that continues with or without her attention. And that creates something powerful, loss aversion. Suddenly, you're not the desperate guy trying to get her back. You're the guy who moved on. You're the guy who has value that she might lose access to. And that shift, that reframe, is everything. It changes the entire psychology of the interaction. Why does this work? Because silence only works as a control tool if the other person cares more than you do. The moment you equalize or tip the scale in your favor, the tool loses its power. When you don't react with panic, with neediness, with explanation seeking, you break the script. You're not playing the role she expected. And humans are wired to notice when patterns break. We pay attention to what's scarce, what's unpredictable, what we might lose. When you were chasing, you were abundant, predictable, always there. Now you're scarce, focused elsewhere, and potentially moving on. That triggers a psychological response in her brain. She starts to question her own position. She starts to wonder if she miscalculated your value. She starts to feel the loss before it's even final. And if there was any genuine interest beneath the game, that's when it resurfaces. That's when she reaches out. That's when the energy shifts back in your direction. But, and this is critical, that shift only happens if your behavior change was genuine. If you were just pretending to move on while secretly obsessing, she senses it. Women are incredibly perceptive about inauthenticity. They can smell fake detachment from a mile away. They know when you're posting gym photos to get a reaction versus when you're genuinely focused on your fitness. They know when you're hanging out with friends as a distraction versus when you're genuinely enjoying yourself. Authenticity can't be faked, not for long. So the transformation has to be real. You have to actually stop caring about her response time. You have to actually start prioritizing your mission. You have to actually build a life that's fulfilling with or without her. And when you do that, when it's real, everything changes. But let me be very clear about something. This strategy is insufficient when you're dealing with chronic manipulation. There are women, just as there are men, who use these dynamics not as occasional tests, but as consistent patterns of emotional control. You need to be able to identify when you're in a cycle that's toxic, not just a temporary test. The signs of chronic manipulation are repetitive and exhausting. She ghosts, then breadcrumbs you with just enough attention to keep you hooked, then ghosts again. She's active and social publicly while privately ignoring you. She uses mutual friends to gather information about you or to send messages indirectly. She creates drama, then goes silent, then returns with explanations that never quite add up. This is not a test. This is a pattern. And in this pattern, you're not a potential partner. You're a source of emotional entertainment, validation on demand, and ego boost when she needs it. You're the backup plan, the safety net, the option she keeps warm while she explores others. You're the emotional tampon she uses when she needs comfort but discards when she's feeling good again. If you recognize this pattern, if you've been through multiple cycles of the same behavior, if you've given her second chances and third chances and fourth chances, then the strategy I described earlier is not enough. You need what I call the nuclear option. This is not about anger or revenge. This is about self-preservation and self-respect. The nuclear option means you cut ties completely. You delete the number, you block on social media, you remove all points of contact. You stop going to places where you might run into her. You stop asking mutual friends about her. You stop feeding the algorithm by viewing her content. You remove her from your mental and digital space entirely. This is hard. This feels extreme. But here's why it's necessary. Manipulators feed on access. They need to know they can reach you, that they can pull you back in, that they have control over your emotional state. When you remove that access, you remove the fuel. And one of two things will happen. Either she escalate, try harder to get your attention, maybe even create drama or reach out through others, which confirms that you were right to cut ties. Or she move on to someone else without a second thought, which also confirms you were right because it shows you were never valued in the first place, just used. Either outcome gives you clarity. Either outcome sets you free. The nuclear option is not a tactic to win her back. It's a tactic to win yourself back. It's about reclaiming your time, your energy, your mental space. It's about refusing to participate in a dynamic that drains you. And it's about setting a standard for yourself. I will not accept breadcrumbs. I will not accept inconsistency. I will not accept being someone's backup option. Once you make that decision and follow through, something shifts inside you. You stop hoping for her to change. You stop analyzing her behavior. You stop checking if she's viewed your story. You're free. And that freedom is worth more than any relationship built on manipulation. That freedom allows you to be available for a woman who actually deserves your time and energy. Now let's talk about what happens when she comes back. Because if you've successfully maintained composure, if you've genuinely moved on with your life, if you've shown through actions that you're not sitting around waiting, there's a good chance she will reappear. This is what I call the return test, and it's where most men lose everything they've gained. Here's why. You've spent weeks or months building yourself up, maintaining boundaries, focusing on your purpose. You've proven that you don't need her. You've reclaimed your power. Then she sends a text. Maybe it's casual. Maybe it's apologetic. Maybe it's an excuse about being busy. Maybe it's just, hey. And in that moment, all the progress you made is at risk. Because the natural impulse is to feel relief, to feel validation, to respond immediately with the same energy you had before she went silent. And if you do that, you've just confirmed that everything you did was a game, that you were waiting for her all along, that the composure was fake. You've reset the dynamic back to where it was, and the cycle begins again. You're back to square one, except now she knows for certain that she can control you with withdrawal and return. The return test is simple. Can you maintain the new standard you've set, or will you revert to the old pattern? If you revert, she learns that silence works, that she can control you with withdrawal and return, that you'll always be there no matter how she behaves. But if you maintain your standard, if you respond calmly but not eagerly, if you make it clear that your life doesn't stop for her, then you pass the test. So what does that look like practically? When she reaches out, you don't respond immediately. You respond when it's convenient for you, which might be hours or even a day later. You don't write paragraphs explaining how you've been or asking how she's been. You keep it brief and neutral. Something like, "I'm good, been busy, what's up?" You don't cancel plans to see her. You don't rearrange your schedule to accommodate her sudden interest. You offer a time that works for you, and if she can't make it, you're fine with that. You don't invest emotional energy into analyzing why she's back or what it means. You observe her actions, not her words, because words are cheap. Actions reveal the truth. This phase is crucial because it's a verification process. Is she coming back because she genuinely realized your value? Or is she coming back because she's bored, because her other options fell through, because she wants validation? You'll know by how she behaves. Does she respect your boundaries? Does she invest in the conversation without you carrying it? Does she make plans and follow through? Does she acknowledge the silence without making excuses that shift blame? If yes, then maybe there's something real to explore. If no, if she's still playing games, still testing, still inconsistent, then you have your answer. And the answer is walk away permanently. No second guessing, no what ifs, no bargaining with yourself. Just a clean final exit. Because you deserve someone who shows up consistently, who communicates clearly, who values your time as much as you value theirs. Let me zoom out for a moment and talk about the bigger picture, because this is not just about handling one woman's silence. This is about who you're becoming as a man. Every moment of silence, every test, every game, every rejection, it's all fuel. It's all information you can use to build yourself into someone who doesn't break under pressure, who doesn't need external validation, who has options because he's valuable. The real goal is not to win some psychological chess game with a woman. The real goal is to become so focused on your mission, so committed to your growth, so invested in your purpose that these dynamics become irrelevant. You're building muscle so you're physically strong and confident. You're building skills so you're competent and valuable in the marketplace. You're building your network so you have social proof and opportunities. You're building your wealth so you have resources and security. You're building your emotional resilience so you can handle rejection, silence, and loss without collapsing. All of these things compound over time. They make you into a man who doesn't need to play games because his value is self-evident. When you're on that path, when you're genuinely committed to becoming the best version of yourself, something interesting happens. The silence doesn't hurt as much. The games don't affect you as deeply. The rejection doesn't define you. Because you know your value isn't determined by one person's perception or interest. You know you're on an upward trajectory. You know you have options. You know that if she's not interested, someone else will be. And more importantly, you know that your happiness, your purpose, your life, none of it depends on her responding to a text. That's freedom. That's power. That's the end goal. When you reach that state, you're operating from abundance, not scarcity. And women can sense that. They're attracted to men who are complete within themselves, who don't need them but choose to include them. That's the paradox. The less you need her validation, the more attractive you become. So how do you know when to stay and when to walk away? Because that's the ultimate question, right? You can employ all these strategies, you can maintain composure, you can pass every test, but at some point you have to make a decision. Is this person worth continued investment, or is it time to move on? Here's a simple checklist. Does she respect your boundaries? Not just verbally, but through her actions. Does she respect your time, your priorities, your need for space when you need it? Does she invest in the connection without drama? Is she contributing energy, effort, and interest, or is everything a push and pull, a game, a test? Does she support your mission? Does she encourage your growth, or does she subtly undermine it? Demand time when you're focused? Create distractions when you're building? If the answer to these questions is no, if there are consistent red flags, if the pattern is more negative than positive, then the nuclear option is your best choice. Cut ties, block contact, move on. No explanation needed, no closure required. Just a clean exit and a commitment to yourself that you won't accept less than you deserve. But if the answer is yes, if she does respect boundaries, if she does invest without drama, if she does support your mission, then you keep her around but with clear limits. You don't go back to the old dynamic where you're chasing, explaining, overinvesting. You maintain the standard you've set. You continue to prioritize your purpose. You make it clear through your actions that she's a part of your life, but not the center of it. And if she's the right woman, she respects that. She appreciates a man who has boundaries, who has a mission, who doesn't lose himself in a relationship. And if she's not the right woman, she eventually reveals that through her behavior, and you'll know it's time to walk away. The right woman will make your life better, not more complicated. She adds value, not drain it. Here's the final truth, the one that ties everything together. Silence is information. It tells you who someone is when they don't get what they want. It tells you how someone handles discomfort, uncertainty, or lack of control. It tells you whether someone has the emotional maturity to communicate directly or if they resort to passive-aggressive tactics. Use that information to build yourself, not to beg for attention. Use it to filter out people who don't align with your values. Use it to reinforce your boundaries and your standards. Because at the end of the day, you decide where your energy goes. You decide who gets your time, your attention, your emotional investment. And the moment you truly internalize that, the moment you stop giving power to people who withdraw to control you, that's the moment you become free. That's the moment you become the man who doesn't chase, who doesn't break, who doesn't compromise his value for anyone. That's when you step into your power fully. So let me ask you, which type of silence tested you the hardest? Was it the test, where you weren't sure if you should chase or hold back? Was it the processing, where you had to respect space even though you wanted to reach out? Or was it the rejection, where you had to accept that she wasn't interested and move on with your dignity intact? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you found this valuable, if this gave you a new perspective or confirmed something you already suspected, do two things. First, share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Someone who's stuck in a cycle of chasing and overthinking, someone who needs this reality check. Second, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell, because I'm going to keep bringing you content that cuts through the noise, that gives you real strategies, that helps you build the life and the mindset that makes all of this easier. Remember, silence is information, not instruction. Use it to build. Don't use it to beg. Now go out there and live like a man who knows his worth.